This is Cult Connections presents Cult Confessions. Every episode, your host Ian, that's me, is joined by a new guest to discuss a classic film. The only thing is, Ian is only now getting round to watching them, from the scariest horrors to hilarious comedies and everything in between. So come and enjoy Ian's Cult Confessions. Hello, it's Ian here, and welcome back to the second episode of my occasional series, Cult Confessions. I am delighted to be joined by the man who I think who has the best Twitter handle, and that is Stephen Spurling, aka Drangula. How are you, Stephen?
I'm doing great. I'm so glad to be back on the show.
No, well, you're very welcome, Stephen, because I love, chatting with you. And we always end up, chatting about lots of different stuff. And I think it's fair to say that you love your films from all over. So no matter what the age is, you'll always find something they're sort of good. And I must admit, Stephen, I did sort of task you with finding me something that I hadn't watched, and we had to narrow it down quite a bit, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Well, one of them that you hadn't watched was W.C. Fields' It's a Gift from 1934, but apparently it's not too available over there. I didn't even check to see if it's available here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I couldn't find it at all. I couldn't find it on any sort of streaming, even their sort of DVD. I couldn't find a sort of copy either. Which so we're gonna have to save that one. Yeah. I think you, Stephen, you were quite keen for us to do their sort of comedy film.
Yeah.
I think maybe they're surprised you by how many of the ones I have seen. So because we went through the likes of their sort of Laurel and Hardy, their Chaplin, all of those sort of greats. But thankfully, and thanks to British their sort of television back when I was they're growing up, I've actually probably seen most of those. So it did take a bit of sort of narrowing there down. However, we got to 1955, so not too old, I would say. And that's The Court, the Jester, starring the one and only the Kaye. So tell me, Stephen, when did you first see this one?
My father had a little convenience store in a small town, and he had a video section. I in fact, was the one who persuaded him to get it, and I picked out the movies, and I would sometimes pick out some old movies like this, even though they didn't really rent out. So it was kind of a waste of his money, but I was very happy to have access to them and see them. One of them was Laurel and Hardy's Way Out West, and another one was this one, The Court Jester. I knew that Leonard Maltin had rated it 4 stars out of 4 in his book. I knew that Leslie Hallowell from Your Parts rated it very highly in his book. I think he rated it 4 stars, which is extremely rare for Leslie Hallowell. I don't know if you've ever browsed through his film guide, but
I have, yeah.
I think he has maybe 100 movies listed as 4 stars, or maybe even less than that. I mean, that's how strict he was. But I think he may have actually rated this one 4 stars. And I watched it many times, and probably one of the reasons why I wanted us to do a comedy is that I have been neglecting comedies lately. For a long time, I pretty much just stick to suspense films, film noir, horror films, especially the older ones. But oh my gosh, it was so nice to revisit this one. I was so happy with it. It definitely stood the test of time. I mean, it was a great film in the late '80s when I saw it as a teenager, and it was such a pleasure to revisit it. So I was really happy with it myself, and I was really glad that you ended up liking it too.
um, it's really funny. I must admit, similar to yourself there, Stephen. I've watched a lot of, actually, I've watched a lot of the, excuse me, the sort of Italian horror films are recently quite sort of gory and a bit odd, and films with not much sort of plot and no real sort of lightness about them. So when I watched this, I must admit it really actually cleansed my the sort of palette very well. So I was really pleased to watch.
Yeah, it's funny though. There is some horrific elements like on the outskirts of the film. Like there's one character who does get tortured into giving information at one point, but we don't see the torture.
Yeah.
So and all of the awful things that happened in the medieval period are hinted at, are joked about, but we don't see them.
No, no, no,
So
no.
so it has a very light tone.
It is. It,
Acknowledges.
yeah, it is a very sort of classic Hollywood take on the medieval England. Certainly, there's not much, grime and violence or anything going on here, thankfully.
Oh,
So,
you said to me that you've never seen England look so warm, and
yeah,
it's
quite.
it's such a it's a very beautiful Technicolor. It's a musical, so it's got that irrealistic, I guess we could call it, sense about it. People are able to break out into song as they in ways that they are not in real life. Oh, by the way, you don't normally like musicals, do you?
No, no. To be honest, they're not my favourite thing, and I think, funnily enough, and this is what sort of amazed me by not actually knowing this film, because this is probably the kind of film that my their mum would have watched. So she loved classic their sort of musicals. So things like the Seventh Seven. Uh, Brides, or Oklahoma, West Side Story, all of those kind of films, that she absolutely loved them. And subsequently I had to watch them as well. I must admit, I'm not a huge favorite of them. So not actually knowing this one, I must admit, I was quite they're sort of surprised by that one, because it would fit right in to the something she would have watched. So
Do you find it easier to watch a comedy that's a musical? Like, have you seen Singing in the Rain, for instance? Do you like that movie?
yeah, yeah, very much
Because
so.
I find that's the case with a lot of people who don't like musicals, is they can't accept the uh, the gimmick of the music and dancing, especially if it's something a serious story, like in West Side Story. My brother, for instance, has a huge amount of trouble, seeing gang members suddenly break out into song and dance. Do you feel that that's your main reason for disliking the musicals, or do you just not like the songs?
I think a lot of it's probably the style of the songs. So there is a very obvious sort of Broadway type sort of style to a lot of their sort of musicals, and I don't really get that. It's just not my thing. I think sort of growing up as well, I mean, I was obsessed with their space and their sci-fi, and you don't really have any sci-fi. They're sort of musicals. It's not really a thing. So
No,
um,
no. There
no,
must be an example, but I can't think of one off the top of my head. I'm sure there must be an example somewhere.
there will be the odd one, but I mean, it's not really those two sort of genres don't really sort of cross over too much.
No.
So no.
I don't know if they ever did in the classic era, but I'm sure somebody's tried one more recently. But yeah, we don't see that too often.
No, not really. I'm sure we will actually find one, and we will have to talk about it in some way.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I'd love that.
however, so this one, so 1955. So the stories by Norman, they're Panama, and Melvin Frank, who also they're the film as well. I think they were best known for their Mr. Blandon's Builds His Dream Home. Yeah. Songs by Sylvia Fine. And actually, there's not that many songs in the film. There's only about 4 or 5. So it's not a full-blown their sort of musical, I would say. It's more sort of comedy, but actually there's sort of action, and there's a bit of their sort of spy type stuff, sort of double crossing, and going on under their sort of cover, and also secret their sort of signals and things like that. So there's an element of that, and absolutely it draws on probably the likes of their sort of Robin Hood, and those sort of their sort of tales as well. So the story basically concerns a hapless carnival performer masquerades as a court their jester as part of a plot against an evil ruler who has overthrown the rightful king. Just to sum it up quite sort of nicely. But it is fun, isn't it? It's a good fun film.
Yeah, it was so enjoyable, and I think this time I appreciated how well it was plotted, because there is a lot going on. There's all the spy stuff. There's all these little subplots. We've got Danny Kaye, who is the posing as the court jester. He's got the romantic story with his captain. He's got the story with a second romance with Angela Lansbury, who's a villain in this one, and we've got him being hypnotized. We've got all sorts of stuff going on. We've got Basil Rathbone, best known for Sherlock Holmes, and he's wanting the court jester to commit 3 assassinations. We've got that going on, all sorts of stuff. The king wants his wench, and she has to dissuade him by pretending that she has the plague. So all sorts of things, and that doesn't even get into the jousting and the other king who's offended, and just so many things in this movie. And it's beautifully plotted, constantly keeps you on your toes, and yet everything is very clear. I think there was never a moment when I was confused by the plot.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's sort of testament to how well sort of made it is. It did. To be fair, it probably caught me quite sort of early, so like I say, it was a bit sort of dubious going in there to the film. I was like, will I like this? But it got me hooked fairly early on. There is a lightness there to it for such, for what could actually sound a fairly grim sort of film. So I'm thinking about sort of medieval England now. That's a genre of their film that I really like. So, but usually it's bloody and sort of grim and violent, and but this manages to capture you know, there's a lovely lightness and sort of warmth and almost sort of tenderness as well to the story. So
Yeah, I really like the relationship between Danny Kaye and Glynis Johns, an actress that I really enjoy every time she pops up in something I see anyway. She's got this wonderful musical voice. I don't even know if she can sing well. She didn't sing in this movie, but she has this marvelous voice that's really distinctive, sort of girlish, and that lasted into her old age, I think. But I know her best. Probably most people know her best as the mother in Mary Poppins.
mhm.
The mother who is also a feminist and goes marching for women's rights. She's really, really good in that movie. Uh, yeah, there is a tenderness to it, among so many other marvelous things about this movie.
I was very taken, I must admit, and the sort of Danny Kaye. Now I've seen a sort of handful of his films, but I can't say that I know him well. But there was, I must admit, I was quite sort of taken, and there's the scene where him and the Jean and the baby, who actually turns out to be the rightful their sort of king, and they're sheltering from their storm or something, or they're camped up for the night, and you know the music starts and then Danny Kaye's away starts singing, and I was a bit like, okay, here we go. Here's the song coming. He's singing there to the baby, but it was lovely, and he was so warm, and um, he makes a great lead in this film. I must admit, he was absolutely superb.
He was. He's a marvelous comedian. I'm told that this is his best film, and that the others don't really quite measure up. And so I've never really taken the trouble to watch too many of the others, but now I'm very excited to visit some of them, especially since Amazon Prime has a lot of them free. I've never seen Wonder Man. I've never seen The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Inspector General has fallen into the public domain, so that one is extremely easy to find and see. There, yeah, it just reminded me how much I loved him in this movie. I've only seen two of his other movies. The other one is White Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm not a great fan of. I think its reputation is a bit inflated. I It's a partial remake of Holiday Inn from 1940. I wrote it down here somewhere. 1940 something, and it's that one has Fred Astaire in it, and I think that one's a little bit better, but it's still a very enjoyable film, and he has a very uh, a, a pretty tender, kind of sweepingly romantic dancing scene in White Christmas. So I enjoyed that. The Kid from Brooklyn was a bit of a disappointment. It's a remake of a Harold Lloyd film from 1934 called The Milky Way, and it's
Mm-hmm.
about a milkman who somehow ends up as a boxer. And uh, I thought The Milky Way was a little bit better, but still, Danny Kaye in both movies was marvelous. Maybe his other films don't measure up to this one, and don't take full advantage of his talents, but this one does. It takes advantage of his ability to play different characters. It takes advantage of his ability to do those wonderful patter routines that he does. He's probably best known for his verbal gymnastics
Mm-hmm.
more than his physicality. But his physicality is also wonderful in this film. He's got a marvelous scene probably more than one scene. I can't remember. He has a sword fight, a long, very long, extended sword fight with
Mhm.
Basil Rathbone, and it somewhat resembles Zorro in that in the Mark of Zorro from 1940, Zorro had to fight, I think, Basil Rathbone when he was in his other guise. His guise uh, an effeminate aristocrat, and it was the sword fight in this movie seemed to be like a comic exaggeration of that. But in that movie, Zorro cannot reveal the fact that he is Zorro, so he has to defend himself and yet look inept while doing it. And that's what happens in this film, except that in this film, Danny Kaye really is inept, and yet somehow he's able to defend himself and not get killed while fighting with a master swordsman. It was one of many marvelous scenes in this movie. I Danny Kaye was not as skilled, though, in real life as Basil Rathbone, and Rathbone said that several times he almost got skewered, but
Yeah.
he
You can.
survived. And
I
so did
must
Danny
admit,
Kaye.
yeah. I mean, you can actually see that in some of the sword fight. So the Danny Kaye is just kind of waving his sort of aimlessly, and sort of Rathbone's like, you can almost see in sort of Rathbone, he's like, what's going on here? But but I mean, they both play it so well, I think. Um, Quite funny. I mean, you were talking about the Zorro there. Now, sort of Danny Kaye in this film, he gets the hypnotized, and obviously from that he thinks he's a great swordsman, and he's brave and chivalrous, and all those kind of their sort of elements. And it sort of captured that fun and uh, the the sort of exciting sort of qualities that I actually got from Errol their Flynn as their Robin Hood. So if you've seen that film there, Stephen, which is a great their sort of action film, and sort of Danny Kaye really sort of captured that as well. Like you believed him when he was they're sort of hypnotized. He was almost a very different their sort of character, but he captured that so well.
Yes, that's what made that scene so marvelous. I mean, it was enough of a feat for him to do the inept sword play.
Mm-hmm.
He was very funny as that, and very skilled. But as you say, he's also been hypnotized by the witch Griselda, and anytime someone snaps his fingers, he is hypnotized again.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone snaps his fingers, he's out of it. So it's a really marvelous scene because he goes in and out. In that scene, he goes in and out of being hypnotized. So he goes from an inept swordsman to a master swordsman. So it just adds another level to what Danny Kaye had to perform, and he performed it so beautifully.
Mm-hmm. And it's almost like his whole sort of face, almost, and his whole sort of body language as well. He actually takes it on, and you can see him, and he's big and bold, and he's they're sort of braving, and he's back to that sort of Danny Kaye character that we maybe know a bit better, that sort of hapless one. But it does it really, really well.
Yeah, Danny Kaye has had a really huge talent stack. He had the verbal gymnastics, as I said, but he also had the physicality. He had so many great qualities, and later in life he would do some serious films too. So yeah, it was a really marvelous performance. I'm glad you mentioned Robin Hood because it, this movie has echoes of The Adventures of Robin Hood from 1939 and The Mark of Zorro from 1940. And Basil Rathbone was in both of those films.
Mm-hmm.
And here he is again, very fit and active at age 63. And he is as marvelous as he always is, and excellent straight man too. So yeah, it was there's so many layers to of things to marvel about and appreciate about this film. Not that it's an art film to just appreciate. It's a very fun movie. It's really wonderful entertainment.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And like I say, the 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 cast really sort of stands out from that. So, like we say, so sort of Danny Kaye, Basil, the Rathbone, a rather glamorous looking Angela, the Lansbury. I must admit, she's she's not Jessica Fletcher in this, by any means, is she? So
No, uh, she uh, she started out playing a villain. Her two earliest films that I'm aware of are The Picture of Dorian Gray, where she's more of a victim in that movie, as I recall. It's been a while since I've seen that. I think she's a prostitute in that movie who gets victimized, but she's quite the villain in Gaslight. For also from around 44, 45, she's a rather treacherous maid in that film. So since I watched so many old movies, just despite her being mostly Jessica Fletcher in my mind, I also kind of see her as a villain because she plays a really unforgettable villain in The Manchurian Candidate from 1963. She's a mother in that one of a son that she has betrayed in the most egregious way.
mm-hmm.
And she does it in order to get revenge, and it's really a marvelous performance, a really sinister performance. She's pretty sinister here, but we're not probably not as scared of her, considering how light the film is in general. But there are really several villains in this movie. We've got the king, two different kings who are villains, and we've got the witch. So yeah, and the casting in this movie is really good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Angela Lansbury was really nice to see.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Any Murder, She Wrote fan would want to see her in this role, to see her as something completely different.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think also looking sort of glamorous. And I think one of the the sort of aspects of this sort of setting is that you can put your leading ladies in nice their sort of dresses. They can have their heaving their sort of bosoms, as it were, and have a bit of sort of glamour, as it were, within 1950s Hollywood. So and to see that Angela Lansbury like that, it does stick out. It did make me focus on just how sort of good she was. Talking about the cast, someone who stood out for me is Cecil Parker. He plays the king. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. Just that for someone who has risen to their power, he wasn't really very good, was he? He was not really the smartest, and you could really see why Basil the Rathbone was wanting get sort of rid of him. So
Yeah, he wasn't very smart. He's very much like the dumb king that we see in the Robin Hood stories. There's the Disney version from '73 is sort of an exaggeration of how dumb the usurper is. And how he's, I think in most versions of Robin Hood, the usurper is kind of a lightweight, and it reminds me of Hamlet, to be honest. Claudius is kind of a lightweight in that movie too, compared to Hamlet. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with these Robin Hood stories. Is we've got a lightweight, and it's Alan Parker plays it marvelously. He's very funny at times, but usually he's the straight man to Danny Kaye, and it works marvelous. I know him best as the adulterer in The Lady Vanishes, Hitchcock's movie from 1938. But he pops up in a lot of movies that I see, and he's always a welcome presence.
Yeah. Certainly, he stood out for me. I loved it. Now, one thing that we'll have to talk about is the wordplay in this film, because that actually gives us so many of the great sort of comic their sort of moments. I must admit, I don't think my their sort of delivery can actually do any of these their sort of justice, but they are some of the funniest bits, aren't they?
Yeah, some of the funniest and some of the most memorable, unforgettable. Uh, Danny Kaye, for the rest of his life after his movie, would have people come up to him and recite the pellet with the poison is in the vessel with the pestle, the palace from the chalice has the brew that is true. Yeah, that people would recite that to him all throughout his life, and yeah, there's a lot of excellent wordplay in this movie. People, I think this movie is where we got the phrase "get it, got it good."
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it. I don't think it was any earlier than that. But I know. I know when I was a kid, I remember people saying it, and I didn't know where it came from until I was a teenager. But yeah, the greatest scene is the scene where he is about to go into battle. He's in a joust with another king who wants the hand of Angela Lansbury. She wants Danny Kaye to win, but the king wants her father, the king, wants the other king to win. And the witch, Griselda, wants to help out Angela Lansbury because otherwise Angela Lansbury will have her killed. So she puts a pellet of poison in one of the two cups that he and the king are going to drink from before they begin the joust, and that sets in motion some wordplay. She tells him that the pellet with the poison is in the vessel with the pestle, and the palace from the chalice has the brew that is true. And he has to recite this to himself over and over again so he can remember which one to take. It's kind of marvelous to think that she could have made it much simpler by just saying, "Drink from the chalice from the palace." That's all you have. But it would have been complicated anyway because they broke the chalice from the palace, and I forget. And the wordplay goes on from there because the chalice from the palace has been replaced with the flagon with the dragon.
Yeah.
So there's a really marvelous routine involving all this wordplay and all this intrigue. And it has antecedents too. In Never Say Die from 1939, which is a Bob Hope movie, they've got some wordplay in that. There's a duel in that movie. It takes place in the 19th century, I believe. And the wordplay in there. There's a cross on the muzzle of the pistol with the bullet, and a nick on the handle of the pistol with the blank. So we've got that routine. So the court jester, the writers probably drew from that, and the writers of this film also wrote a Southern Yankee with Red Skelton, and they had similar wordplay in that one. That was from 1948. The boot with the buckle and the pocket of the jacket, and goes on from there. There's one pale face, the pale face from 1948, which is Bob Hope. So people often cite one of these three films as the antecedent for this marvelous routine, but the one people remember the best is the pellet with the poisons and the vessel with the pestle. And I just love it, and I think it's the thing that most people remember from the movie.
Well, I'm just really glad there, Stephen, that I got you there to sum that up absolutely perfectly, rather than me trying to get my tongue around it, because I really wouldn't have managed. But and if you're listening and you think, I don't really like the sound of this, do watch the film, because it is hilarious. And there's not many comedies that make me laugh and laugh out loud. And, this one actually did. So, and that, so to the power of a film that is 66 years old now.
Yeah,
I think that's absolutely brilliant. So, because it was, genuinely funny. And actually there throughout the film, it made me laugh all the way through. It was so good. It was so good. There's not much I can really criticize about the film at all. How about you, Stephen? Is there anything that you didn't like?
I wouldn't say that I disliked it. I guess it's more of an observation, as you said before we started this. More of an observation than a criticism, but it descends into a little bit too much silliness at the end, perhaps, with the little people. That's another aspect that we didn't even cover, is that there are little people in this movie who save the day, and they've got this acrobatic routine where they get rid of all the soldiers by I don't know, they lay on their backs, and they kick them up with their feet. They kick them up to the next person, who then kicks it up to the next person, and that's all done with wires, very obviously. But it's a comedy, so if this were a serious movie, I think we'd if this happened in The Adventures of Robin Hood, I think we'd have more of an objection to that.
Yeah.
But it's a silly movie, and so it didn't really bother me too much. But yeah, I have very little criticism for it. Like I said, the plotting, it was really marvelous, and there's so much going on, and we didn't even get to the fact that how good the witch is, Griselda, played by Mildred Natwick. I know her best from The Trouble with Harry from 1955 Hitchcock movie, but she's in so many movies, and really marvelous in this one. We even get, I don't know if you noticed that the tallest of the three Kingsmen who Basil Rathbone wants to murder, the tallest was played by Alan Napier, who was Alfred the Butler in the 1966 Batman series. So that was nice to see him show up, playing a very different character. We've got Robert Middleton as Griswold, the king that Danny Kaye has to joust. It's probably his best known film, The Court Jester, but he pops up in a lot of movies and does a really good job. And you already mentioned Cecil Parker. So yeah, there's so much good stuff, and even though I'd seen it many times as a kid, that there was as a teenager, It's been a while since I've revisited it, and so there were still a lot of surprises. I'd forgotten that at the very beginning we're led to believe that Danny Kaye is going to be the Black Fox, which is the Robin Hood figure in this.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not the Black Fox. He's the wannabe carnival guy who's one of the merry men, and he's pretty low status among the merry men. But he ends up out Robin Hooding the Black Fox and doing most of the work of saving the day. Although the Black Fox helps out. So yeah, there's just so much marvelous stuff about this movie.
Well, one thing, actually talking about that, one thing that I did like, and I thought, oh, this is they're going to drag this out over the whole film, so it's quite obvious that the Danny Kaye is in love with Glynis the Johns from the start. That's fairly obvious, and I thought, oh, we're going to spend most of the film where he actually has to win her over. But that doesn't actually happen. He wins her over fairly quickly, and
that was one of the things I'd forgotten, as a matter of fact, and that was a surprise to me, because she seems pretty cold to him at first, but then it develops pretty early in the film that the only reason she's being cold is because they've got a mission that's very important, and she doesn't want to distract from the mission. But in a quiet moment of the movie, she admits to him that she cares for him, and so not too much of the movie is taken up with him trying to win her over. Probably at least as much of the movie is taken up with the romance between Danny Kaye and Angela Lansbury. When Danny Kaye's hypnotized is the only time that he is in love with Angela Lansbury's character. But when he's not hypnotized, then he's back to thinking about Glynis Johns, presumably.
yeah, and just done so well. I do have a minor point. It's not a criticism. That we did mention just how nice and warm and they're sunny the medieval England looks. So there's a couple of outsides their scenes where they are traveling along their coastline. And my only thought is, you cannot fool me that is not England. That is obviously sort of California. Because the English coastline does not look like that.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's the sort of thing I never notice. I'm never good with something like that. That's very funny.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just like, no, you're not fooling me for that one.
So you couldn't accept that was the coastline back in the medieval period?
No, definitely not. No. There, if anything, it would be, cold, windy, wet. Just not looking like that whatsoever. So no, that just didn't work. But it didn't they sort of take it out of the film in any way, because it looks lovely. It's there was a VistaVision it was shot in, I believe.
Yeah, and this was the first time I got to see it in its original shape. VistaVision wasn't nearly as long as CinemaScope. CinemaScope movies don't really look that great on your TV screen. Even today with our wider screens, they still have to mask the picture a bit at the top and the bottom. They have to put the black lines, but VistaVision. I think the thing about VistaVision was that it was supposed to look good whether it was widescreen or not. So a lot of the VistaVision movies look really good. Even back in the day before we had the widescreen TVs, the VistaVision movies looked good on our TV screens, whereas the CinemaScope movies were constantly panned and scanned. I remember thinking that Rebel Without a Cause looked really bad, for instance, but Hitchcock made a lot of his movies in VistaVision, so his movies looked as if they were framed for our television sets, but they were in fact widescreen. But it was nice to see it in its original shape for once, because I never had before. When I was a teenager, we only had our regular TV sets, and we only had VHS tapes.
Exactly. We missed out so much back then, didn't we? Just because films were usually panned and scanned to fit the TV screen.
Yeah, it was so frustrating because there were always movie theaters playing old movies, but it was still a pretty rare thing. When I moved to Chicago in their early 90s, and there were a lot of theaters there playing old films, but even still, you had to wait for somebody else to play it. You couldn't choose what you wanted to see like you can these days, and it's so much better, because I just assumed that there were some movies I'd never be able to see properly, and now I have the opportunity. In fact, I ought to take the opportunity to finally watch Rebel Without a Cause in its original shape, because sometimes they did a really, really bad job. I remember with Rebel Without a Cause, they showed it on TV. It was just constantly panning from the right to the left, and then it would snap back to the right, and then pan back to the left, and snap back to the right, and pan back. It looked awful, and I didn't understand what was happening until later, because I didn't know that they were trying to accommodate the widescreen back then. But they would do some really awful things. Sometimes they would crush the picture, and so everybody would be elongated on the TV screen, and that looked really awful, of course. So it's nice that we can finally see the movies in the shape that they're supposed to be in.
Yeah, definitely. And this one's absolutely sparkling, nice, lovely and warm as well. Lovely, lovely warm film, and a lovely warm, their sort of color, their sort of palette, they're to go with it as well. So I would like to say thank you, Stephen. Thanks for recommending this film, because I absolutely loved it. It's actually on television again there tomorrow as we are recording, and I am going to actually record it and watch it again, and because I just absolutely loved it. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I just loved having these conversations with you.
Yeah, me too, Stephen. So until next time, everyone, thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Cult Connections. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we would love it if you left a review. Follow us on Twitter at Connections Cult for more fun, share your ideas, and maybe even be on the show. Thank you.